You've spoken before about the importance of being client zero when it
Yeah.
comes to AI, right? And what does that mean to make Insight that proving ground for AI? And why is that a non-negotiable today?
Yeah, I think we've got to use our own technology, and through that use, we've got to really bring that expertise, to our customers. You've heard the phrase "cobbler's shoes," I'm sure, which is the cobbler's children have the worst shoes in the whole town. We just cannot be like that.
Welcome to Insight On, the podcast for leaders who need technology to deliver real results. No fluff, no filler, just the insight you need before your next big decision. Hi, I'm your host, Jeremy Hodge, and today we're getting insight on becoming an AI leader with Adrian Gregory, president of Insight EMEA. Let's go. Tell me about a story where we've taken, a high-impact AI use case. What was the problem you were trying to solve, and what were the results that you saw from that?
Yeah, so one is in the solution space. So, and it's actually a homegrown tool that we've used, which was originally called Sales Coach. It's now called Insight AI Coach because we've added lots of different functionality to it. But the original use case was that when we were building proposals for customers, answering RFIs, RFPs, how do you really get across and understand what have we done for other customers, how to structure a statement of work correctly, how to produce a proposal correctly, how to think about pricing correctly. And really the problem statement was we got an output that was really dependent on the individual team that was involved. So none of them incorrect, but just all had their different flavors from the different teams, and they would draw from their own knowledge, not necessarily from the wider corporate knowledge. So with Insight AI Coach, it managed to pull together consistent quality responses. It could also toggle things like risk. So you can look at, do I want to take on a deal of risk with this, or I'm in an environment where I want to take zero risk. How does the pricing work? What does the competitive pricing look like? So it would do a market scan, based on information that would fed it, and make sure you were competitive in the marketplace as well, and then just produce a really quality standard response that helps us to win more customers. So that's an example of what we've used internally. It also helps to accelerate production of these proposals, and it also helps us to get more throughput with fewer people.
And what has the team's reaction been to that?
Yeah, I think initially skeptical. Like all these things, you go through the change curve.
Yeah.
So there's that initial, wow, this is great. This looks absolutely fantastic. And then, what, you want me to use this day to day and everything? Really? But that's kind of what I did for a job, and it was a key part of what I do day to day. To then a realization that actually this is getting better quality. I'm starting to get different references, different use cases, more specific references for the RFI or RFP that I'm responding to, or the statement of work I want to make, and I can do more of these. So it kind of went through that change curve, and I would say there was this initial euphoria, then a period of why is the uptake not really happening, and then it sort of kicks in and really takes off and embeds into day-to-day operations.
So it sounds like to overcome that skepticism, just having teams dive in and adopting is the best way, so that they see the benefit and then can make it part of their workflow.
Yeah, I think so. I just really emphasize this management of change. It's super, super important. And sometimes you think that's obvious. You think, look, just put in something that's fantastic and it'll work and people will pick it up and run with it. Not so. You need the change management around it, and to really help people figure out how to use this effectively and in their role. And that's the same externally as well. You come onto that if we don't address this as part of our customer engagements, then it's not going to go down as well as if we've got a really comprehensive change management approach.
Right. So making these proposals, creation more streamlined.
Yep.
Any other use cases that you think are really promising that you'd want to highlight?
So another one is in operations. So we deal with a large volume of let's say more transactional quotations as well for product, be that hardware, software, putting together bills of materials and things like that. And then how does that connect back into the logistics organization for for warehousing, shipping, freight, all that sort of stuff. And we have got quite a back office operation that
Yeah.
deals with all that stuff. So we've introduced again steadily technology that will take on more of the mundane tasks that are involved in that, in terms of scraping together bills of materials, doing quality checks on them to make sure they're right, things aren't missed, or you've got wrong versions, you've had a new product upgrade or things like that. So it kind of catches all those things, and then make sure the pricing is correct. It's you've got the right SKU number, all of that quality check, and then it produces the kind of paperwork and outputs to logistics. So again, not something that's really taken away the need for the back office function, but just made some of the mundane tasks of producing, checking, which can be quite laborious because you're comparing one list against another, and then just trying to quality check in that way. It's kind of automated a lot of that, and just made that job much easier, and much easier to get closer to 100% accuracy in terms of those bills of materials, quotations, and then what goes on into the logistics function.
I imagine to pull that off, it requires a lot of integration with existing systems, with existing data sources.
Yeah.
What did it look like to deploy that? How much time was spent having to do preparing the data, making sure things could integrate?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, on the technology side, relatively straightforward. And back to my point earlier, where oftentimes technology is not really the longest pole in the tent on this stuff. So honestly, getting that done is now a matter of weeks, to build that type of thing, and to deploy it. More of it is about the operational processes and making sure that it's part of the workflow, and back to that, change management, that I spoke about. That's where it takes the time, and to make sure that that's integrated effectively.
Excellent. So it sounds like learning a lot from being client zero, sort of the wins, the failures, the unexpected
hmm
hurdles. How does that shape the advice that you're giving to clients?
Yeah, so back to change management, and what we found. So typically, in a lot of client conversations, there's also a misconception about what constitutes either a problem or an opportunity that needs AI to solve it. So what we find, talking to clients, is in a lot of cases, it's not actually an AI shaped problem.
Right.
It's classic data and analytics,
Or automation or, yeah.
automation, some machine learning, something like that. That kind of a problem or opportunity to solve. So the first thing that we've learned is, look, try and sift out here what's really AI and what's not AI, and then think about outcomes. So outcome focused. So the way we approach it with clients is talk about the business, talk about the business outcomes that you want, talk about the business operations that get you there. So there's a lot of talk about the business up front, rather than the tech. Because otherwise, if you start with technology and kind of work forwards from there, or work backwards from there, it's not going to work. There's a famous Steve Jobs quote that says, start with the customer experience and work
Absolutely.
backwards to the technology, not the other way around. And he said that nearly 30 years ago, and it's still very relevant today. So that's kind of how we approach it. And then once you've got use case candidates identified, It's then the expertise about, well, okay, what's in a 4-box matrix, what's going to deliver high value, and what's easy to implement, versus what's going to deliver lower value and be quite hard to implement. You cross all those out. You definitely go for what's easy to implement, what's high value, and then you've got some question marks which might be more tricky to implement, deliver high value, but you might want to think more carefully about those. And then you get into the tech solution to go deploy. And back to what's, I guess, become my favorite buzz phrase of the day, change management. Back to that is really how to embed it in operations.
I want to go back to something you said about, client comes to you with a problem, and sometimes it's just automation or data management. When you eventually get to the technology discussion around that problem, and maybe there really isn't much AI involved, are they concerned about that? Is it more they just need whatever technology or whatever tools is going to help them solve the problem? How do they feel about that?
No, I don't think that's particularly an issue. In many cases, organizations have got their own expertise around this, but perhaps they just, because their kind of focus group, if you like, is themselves.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have all of the experience of doing this with a whole bunch of other clients or different cases. So no, they do bring expertise in there. They're not really offended that it's not AI and it's something else. It's not really an issue for us, no.
So you talked about how, so much of the process is aligning on the business problem you're trying to solve, making sure you're going to drive business value, and then getting to technology. But when you get to technology, there's this classic buy versus build dilemma. And that's not unique to AI. I think every technology shift we've seen that happens. When you're evaluating that, is there a single question leaders can ask to figure out what's the right way to go? Or how do you advise them on that?
So it depends what you're trying to do, with the business. And I still think we're in the problem solving or opportunity capture phase with AI, which is discrete problems, discrete opportunities, and how do you use AI to help to automate, drive intelligence, and drive different outcomes, and do that much more effectively and efficiently than you could before. Where we've not got to is, how do you run the fabric of the business on AI? That's maybe that's an emerging question, but you've still got large systems of records that exist, and largely business processes are based around those systems of record, and then you've just got a whole set of other things, other problems and opportunities to solve for, around that data, around external sources of data, and around, client journeys that you bring into that mix. So I still think we're quite kind of discrete problem or opportunity solving stage at the moment.
Do you think most companies underestimate the work they need to do on their data and their systems before they jump into one of these projects?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more accepted wisdom now. And I'd also counter it a little bit by saying, also don't overthink it. I mean, look, it's it is of course much better to have all your data in the right shape, format, in the right kind of data lake, data warehouse. Be able to ingest external sources of data. Now, of course, that's much preferable. But also, depending on the problem you need to solve, or the opportunity to try and capture, sometimes you don't need all of your data in the right place, in the right format. You just need a subset of data. So yes, it is. I don't want to kind of pretend it's not fundamentally important, but it doesn't have to be there as a prerequisite for all AI use cases, I think is what I'm saying. And the market is now becoming much more knowledgeable about how important data is to more systematic use of AI, I would say.
Okay. So companies don't need to be scared. They don't need to think, I've got to get everything in order before I can get started. There's pathways if you want to go the more complex route versus, say, more out of the box almost.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all sorts of different options. Now, if you want to say, I want to look at all of my business processes left to right, and I've got 250 business processes in the organization as an example, and I want to systematically work through all of those and improve them. I want to use AI as part of it, and think about my whole end-to-end business operation as a result. Then yeah, of course, you need your data in the right place, in the right structure, in the right format, with the right roadmap against it. But let's say the examples I was using of proposal writing, price comparison, making sure you get quality into those documents, contracts, things like that. You don't need all of your data in the right structure warehouse where you can work with a subset of data quite happily to get real benefit.
So if I'm a business that's overwhelmed by just how AI can transform my business, and there's so many use cases out there, and you just had to give me 3 starting points, let's say, what would be a few use cases you might recommend to the average business in terms of how they might find value from AI?
Yeah, I would start with clients. I would start with their clients and say, well, okay, what are the things that on the client journeys they're either finding most difficult, or you're thinking about areas where you can improve and provide better value. So it depends a little bit on the business, right? And it depends on, are they consumer facing, are they B2B? How do they engage with with their clients? But typically, you get a lot of client touch points where let's say they need to interact to buy something, or they need to interact to raise a complaint, or they need to interact because they want to find out more information about your offering, or they want to there's some kind of buying signals of what they're searching for on your on your websites, various other things like that. So it's those points that I would think about capturing and using AI to provide a better experience to clients and help them to get to the right answer faster, and feel like they're being engaged. So, if you've got a business where clients want to get in touch with you and there's a certain experience around that and they're struggling, then you're going to fall behind pretty quickly, I would suggest. So I would start with clients.
Yeah. So it seems like that common thread is just go back to your business problem. Don't get so
Yeah.
caught up in the technology, all
Yeah.
the changing news every day about models or new applications. Just like go back to the fundamentals.
Yeah, 100%. Don't make it technology focused. Make it business focused.
Yep. On that, I want to talk about sort of timeless principles, because we hear a lot, oh, so much is changing, it's a whole new world. But I have to believe at both a technology level and a business level, some things hold true, right? That were lessons from 20, even 50 years ago. And we've talked a lot about how you have to ground back in the business, ground back in what your customers' problems are. What are a couple things that stand out to you in terms of those timeless principles that even with AI and all this change still remain true?
Yeah, you've got to think about things in the right way. I mean, look, I could give you an example of how we're engaging a lot of clients on what we call rapid AI in EMEA. We've got a number of customers looking at this. So it kind of starts with really breaking down what the business is trying to achieve. That's never changed, right? I mean, I've been in the tech business 30 years. That's never changed. Then trying to wheedle out which use cases are going to be easy to achieve, versus those that are going to be harder to achieve. That's not changed, right? Effort versus output. Then maybe what has changed a little bit along that journey is then what you do with that information. So we're now moving much more to kind of rapid proof of value, rapid prototyping, and making sure that there is demonstration of that value early. And I would say the technology is such now that you can produce those things extremely quickly. So going into what's changed, what hasn't changed. So what hasn't changed then in all of that is having the right team. You still need humans in this to interpret outputs, interpret requirements, and match the technology to it. Now, maybe the shape of that team has changed. So in this particular example, we have a lead consultant. By the way, that hasn't changed. That's been around for as long as I've been in the industry. But then you've got the concept of forward deployed engineers who are doing this rapid prototyping, approach. That has changed, right? They're relatively new roles that have come through. But having the right team who can translate client, needs or outcomes and marry technology with it, that's not changed. Then into methodology. So methodology, technology enables methodology changes, for sure. But having a methodology that you follow, which cycles round, business need, prototype, understand the prototype, go deploy into production, understand what we've got, iterate, that whole, kind of agile, iterative way of working, that's been around for, I don't know, 20, 25 years now and probably beyond. That hasn't changed. So that kind of way of working and that methodology, tech has brought a different acceleration into that, but that hasn't changed either. What has changed quite markedly is the reference architecture. So with AI in particular, you've now got a different reference architecture. You've got a different set of technologies. You've got a different set of possibilities, and going through that, kind of life cycle with different tech, that has changed. But fundamentally, the team engagement, the methodology that you take them through, understanding the outcomes and iterating, those things are going to remain consistent no matter what the tech is.
I'm glad you mentioned the team because I want to talk about the people element of this, right? And especially skills. And when we think about skills in AI, people talk about things like prompt engineering, which is a given, but it feels like there's some soft skills that still matter now.
Yeah.
So can you talk about things like, critical reasoning, systems thinking? You mentioned a few of those, but when you're hiring and you're building your teams now, what are some things you're looking for?
Yeah, so it's that, I mentioned the role forward deployed engineer for this rapid prototyping. It's a marriage of really deep technology understanding and understanding the art of the possible of the reference architecture that I spoke about, married with an ability to work with a lead consultant who can help to, decipher a little bit the business requirements or the outcomes, the outcomes, that are wanted. And, that role is definitely changing because then what you can do is work with the tech in real time against clients' business needs to very quickly start to produce outcomes which are visible that the client can see. So you've got this mashup of some of those roles, whereas typically, not many years ago, you would have, a kind of a lead consultant, you would have a product manager, you would have an architect, you would have developers, you'd have all these kind of discrete roles that would work together in a team to produce this. A lot of those roles are getting squashed now into this kind of forward deployed engineer concept, which is a very interesting role.
I want to go back to the client zero notion, and you're obviously getting pitched on a lot of projects, I'm sure, for AI and a lot of different ideas. When you hear a proposal for an AI project, what are some sort of green flags when you're hearing that say, oh, this will probably be successful? And what are some other ones where you're like, I'm not sure if that's the right way to go?
Yeah, I think back to what is really the outcome. So another thing that hasn't changed in business is return on investment, and that is absolutely critical. So is this really a need that the business has? Is it really something that people are asking for? Is it something that is going to provide a fast value creation, solve a problem, or enable us to capture an opportunity? How long will it take to implement? What's the cost? What's the return on that investment? So I really look at things from that perspective. So if it's a great idea for use of technology, could be amazing, could be interesting, could be like, yeah, wow, that looks fantastic, but in reality, there's not going to be an ROI. Then those types of things, end up going to the back of the queue. And the ones that actually may be more straightforward and less, kind of wow factor may go to the top of the queue just because they'll deliver an outcome faster.
Mm.
So that's kind of I tend to put a business lens on these things.
Yeah. Adrian, you've got a oversight of a lot of different countries overseeing EMEA. And I'd love to hear your perspective on what's an AI adoption trend that's happening. And I know it's a lot of different countries in EMEA, a lot of different continents, but what's something that especially American leaders might be underestimating or missing that's happening in these other regions?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a lot of these things are happening globally, right? So I don't see massive differences, between at least the desire of a number of different countries and markets to progress. Maybe there's an ability. So it comes down to, I think, access to capital is really, really important, and how much affordability a market has got. So if you're looking in, UAE and Saudi as an example, they've truly stated, both countries have stated that they want a percentage of their economy to be based around AI in the future, and they're investing heavily into it, like really, really heavily. So, for them, it's almost a national mission to go drive it, and they've got capital. They've got a lot of capital to spend. So you're seeing a lot of acceleration there, a lot more kind of experimentation, a lot longer tolerance on ROIs as well, which is coming through, which is probably a little bit different. I mean, I'd say in the US market, there's still a huge amount of investment, going on, and probably in AI, there's a higher tolerance on return on investment than there is for many other things in the US economy as well. But I'd say, there in Saudi and UAE, that is absolutely the case. I think one other difference that I do see, particularly in the European market, is kind of the focus on ethics. So there's a lot of concern about harmful AI, and making sure that there isn't discrimination,
Yep.
or there isn't kind of issues with unintended consequences, and really thinking about how to build that in as part of the solutions. And we've already seen some regulation come in, and I think it will just strengthen and strengthen. So I think that's one difference that I see. Another thing that may not be familiar to US audiences, because it's kind of just inbuilt in the US, but that is sovereignty. So with obviously a lot of the, big hyperscaler organizations, being US based, it's not something that the US thinks about, which is, okay, well, where is my data, and what are the restrictions on that data, and what needs to happen with it, and what if there's an issue, what does that mean, what's my risk profile? So in a lot of European countries, there's a lot of thought about data sovereignty, and making sure that that's built in as part of the solution. And again, working with a lot of US hyperscalers who have got data centers and facilities in all of the European countries, but but there's also an extra thing about making sure it's not kind of in the scope of US law about being able to pull data back to the US if required. So that's probably an extra thought process as well that I see.
Do you think that with the data sovereignty issue that there's going to be a whole new slew of providers?
We're very much seeing that. So we're actually working with one organization who's based in the DACH region, and they're building their own AI data centers, very much based on a sovereign theme. They think there's a market for it. They're also building very sustainable data centers as well, because again, that's probably more of a topic that's still very much at the forefront of thinking in Europe, versus the US at the moment. So we are starting to see some of these kind of smaller niche providers crop up as well, and yet it is driven by the sovereignty angle.
You mentioned that in some ways regulation can actually strengthen innovation. I'm wondering if you could kind of unpack that a little bit more and talk about how you see that happening and what the perception is in Europe right now around things like the EU AI Act and how that's actually strengthening
Yeah.
AI innovation.
Yeah, I mean the EU AI Act, is coming into force in stages, and I would see that for organisations like us, and I think for general business to business AI solutions, um, it's a very straightforward thing. It's just how think of it as a set of rules to make sure that AI isn't harmful, isn't discriminatory, doesn't provide unintended consequences, and then over the next few years, it will just kind of ramp up and tighten on those rules. Where it probably causes a problem, problem, but more of a thought process is around social media. And then if you apply the EU AI Act to a lot of social media and say, well, who's accountable for lack of discrimination and making sure there's not any unintended consequences when how much is that to do with the social media platform, and how much is it to do with the users of the platform, and where do you draw the line on what those social media organizations are accountable for and not accountable for? Then you're probably getting into more debatable areas, but I think for general solutions, a lot of these get built in. Now, in terms of innovation, what it will drive, I think, is better kind of quality checking on the way through. And already we've got agentic solutions now where you get quality agents that are built in, checking. So these things, because it's rule based, it's actually pretty straightforward for AI to update itself on those rules, get a quality agent and check that how you're designing either your AI implementation or your AI product, that it's got these things built into it, and it's safe and compliant with the geographies that it needs to be.
I want you to think 5 years in the future. What is going to be that differentiator between the companies that just sort of hobble through this AI era and those that truly harness it to transform their business? What's that going to be?
So I think history is littered with examples where organizations face tough decisions, and ultimately they will face decisions about what do they do with their existing revenue streams. And I think for let's just say most organizations, they'll face decisions about should they cannibalize their own revenue to drive faster growing sources of revenue and high growth clients, or do they try and hang on to what they've got and kind of eke that out? So famous examples in the past are organizations like Kodak, who invented digital photography and then decided not to really go for it. Blockbuster is another very, very famous one, who decided that rentals were where it's at and not streaming. So you're going to have similar examples. So I think the winners are going to be those organizations that are brave and go after their own sources of existing revenue and cannibalize it. And it's going to be different business models. It's going to be different charging models. It's going to be different business models that they need to bring to their clients, and they're going to have to be brave about going after those. The ones that will lose are the ones that just don't get there fast enough, and they try and protect their quarterly numbers as much as they can, as long as they can, and ultimately they'll end up being the next Kodak, the next Blockbuster, and I think we'll see a few of those examples.
All right, final question. What's one thing you learned recently?
One thing. So a couple of fun ones. I learned never to take the red eye from New York to London.
That'll do it.
I'd not done it for a while, but wow, that is a hard flight. I also learned that when beavers are chewing through trees, they stop to listen to the tree to figure out which way it's gonna fall. So there's some great footage.
Talk about getting feedback on it.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking, make sure they're not going to get crushed by the tree. That was quite an interesting piece of learning. But no, bringing it back to tech. There was a recent survey with OpenAI and Anthropic who looked at AI usage. And actually, there's quite a growing swell of AI usage for things like relationship, personal reflection, greetings, and general chat. And actually, 4% of all AI usage is for that, which is broadly the same as computer programming. So
wow!
There's a little.
It's the same as coding. I did not realize
it's the same usage according to OpenAI and Anthropic. They did a survey of all their AI usage. So it probably kind of leads us to think, what are the social impacts of AI? And there's a lot of people using it for to help with those aspects of life, and I think that's just going to grow and grow.
Oh yeah, that's a fascinating topic. We could almost do another podcast on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Adrian, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Insight On. If today's conversation sparked an idea or raised a challenge you're facing, head to insight.com. You'll find the resources, case studies, and real-world solutions to help you lead with clarity. If you found this episode to be helpful, be sure to follow Insight On, leave a review, and share it with a colleague. It's how we grow the conversation and help more leaders make better tech decisions. Discover more at insight.com. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are of those of the host and the guests and do not necessarily reflect on the official policy or position of Insight or its affiliates. This content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional or legal advice.